So the right-wing web designing chick who never designed a website in her life lied about to a couple wanting to uh, have her design a website, and the Supreme Court ruled on a case that was based upon a lie. Hopefully it gets overturned, but I doubt it.
Last week, in a major First Amendment case, the Supreme Court ruled that businesses do have a right to refuse service, not against a particular type of customer, but against messages they may disagree with. The case involved an evangelical web designer who opposed same-sex marriage and may have an interesting twist here. The New Republic and now the Washington Post are reporting that a man cited in that case never requested services from the designer and actually had nothing to do with the case itself.
So she sued based upon false pretenses, claiming that the law would injure her. Yet she was never injured in any way.
Claims are sparking a lot of questions as an ABC News poll shows more and more Americans disapprove of the court itself. For more on this, let's bring in ABC News legal contributor and law professor at American University, Kim Whaley. So, Kim, just first break down this case for us and why these allegations are so explosive.
Well, the case involves a hypothetical potential challenge by Colorado to a hypothetical website made by this plaintiff. And generally, courts can't take hypothetical cases. You actually have to be injured. And so it's embarrassing for the court.
Yeah, it would be like suing somebody, claiming that in the future they may harm you over a law that is passed or may get passed, in the Supreme Court ruling on that. It's like, no, nothing has happened to you.
That at some point in the process of this lawsuit, in an attempt to show some sort of injury, the plaintiff's lawyers produced a request by an alleged gay couple to make a
Oh, wow, and the guy isn't even gay. He's been married to a woman for 15 years. Wow. It's wild that this chick just randomly chose some guy to use, and she didn't even know anything about him. Though, I mean, not unsurprising for a right-wing Christian to lie.
website, and it sounds like that fact might not have been verified.
So, Kim, the legal organization backing that designer released a statement saying whether Lori received a legitimate request or whether someone lied to her is irrelevant. No one should have to wait to be punished by the government to challenge an unjust law. What do you
No one lied to her. She lied to the courts.
make of that response?
Well, there's two pieces to it. One is there is a obligation for all lawyers to take reasonable steps to confirm facts that are submitted before the court. So I think in terms of their ethical obligations, there might be an argument that it would have been reasonable to double check it was a legitimate inquiry, especially given how much misinformation and trolling exists online. The second piece is that it's not entirely true that you don't get to just sue the government because you might one day be prosecuted or have some kind of ordinance applied against you. You know, this is a squishy area of the law, but for the most part, you have to show a real possibility that you are going to have to comply with the law. Oftentimes, you have to wait until you're actually contacted by Colorado. Here, the plaintiff didn't even make wedding websites at all, let alone for gay couples. So it's very attenuated.
Yeah, she calls herself a web designer, yet has never made a website in her life.
And as I said, it's very embarrassing, really, for the Supreme Court because it highlights that they reached into this culture war in this case when they really didn't have to. They could easily have dismissed the case saying, listen, this woman has not been injured. It's just a hypothetical claim here. And so we're not going to wade into it.
Right. I mean, you would think that, you know, the lawyers would have done their due diligence here. So if the reports are accurate, right, what consequences could there be?
At this point, none, because Justice Gorsuch, in his majority opinion, basically bought that argument that was made by the plaintiff's lawyers that, listen, it's possible at some point if she did make a website, Colorado would step in and enforce the law, because they had enforced a law, if you recall, against a baker who was actually requested to make a website and said no. That case was resolved on other grounds. So I don't think there is any recourse. I mean, it's possible that the judge in the case could issue some kind of sanctions or require some kind of a hearing on this. But because the Supreme Court did not require a showing of someone actually being turned down, I really don't think there's any recourse legally, given this glitch, which is, as I said, embarrassing not just for the court but for the lawyers, because lawyers are required to make sure they don't file fake stuff with the federal court.
To a layperson, it seems almost absurd that there wouldn't be a consequence. So what is this, the way this case is played out, what does this tell you about this particular Supreme Court and how it's choosing to operate?
Well, it tells us that the court, as I said, is willing to get involved in political policy in ways. I mean, this whole idea of having an actual injury and not allowing hypothetical claims, the point of that is to keep the courts out of the business of making laws. Because the idea is if you're just going to make a generic law or challenge Colorado's law, you got to go to the Colorado legislature. And the fact that the Supreme Court, it can't be fired at the ballot box. I mean, this court, when it construes stuff under the Constitution, it's sort of making itself the king of the day, the king of the United States, because it cannot be challenged in any way unless there's an amendment to the Constitution or a new configuration of the court. So, this is a really important conversation to have around the power.
We need to make it so that the Supreme Court justices aren't appointed as a lifetime appointment, but they have term limits and have to campaign just like everybody else, looking to get a high seat in office.
Power grab that's happening on this court, and of course every Supreme Court could have done it. It's just a little odd for legal scholars like myself that this configuration of the court is going so far outside the boundaries of its jurisdiction, arguably.
And Kim, there is this new ABC News Ipsos poll that shows a majority of Americans believe the justices base their rulings mainly on partisan political views. Do you think that accurately reflects this court?
I don't think mainly is fair. The court does cite prior precedent, but it's been overruling prior precedent and overruling prior precedent in a way like with Dobbs, the first time in American history to obliterate a constitutional right, an individual constitutional right, for pretty, I think flawed.
Well, the right-wing justices, yeah, they're basing all their rulings on like religion and their own politics more than the actual law. I mean, if they had cared about their law, they wouldn't be supporting this chick who's lying.
Reasoning on a lot of grounds that we could talk about. So I think it's a fair assessment, and I assume this Chief Justice is concerned because the legitimacy of the court is important. It doesn't have its own army to enforce its rulings, and we don't want to get to a place where people just think, okay, it's a bunch of politicians, I'm just not going to follow what it says. That would be a really bizarre turn of events, and just like any.
Well, what's the point in following the laws of the lands when none of the politicians, the Supreme Court justices, or the cops follow the laws? It's pretty funny how, all the poor people are required to follow laws, except, certain groups of people.
Any institution, if people don't believe that an umpire at a baseball game is calling balls and strikes legitimacy, they just don't go. They don't think it's a serious endeavor, and that's really the threat, in addition to the fact that so many people are affected by these rulings in major ways, and they have no way of participating in the choice of who's on the court or how these things are coming out, and it's affecting lives.
Great point.